Good morning. Today I have three small readings. They're quotes by authors about the subject of reading. Anne Patchett, an American novelist, says, "Reading fiction is important. It is a vital means of imagining a life other than our own, which in turn makes us more empathetic beings." Madeline Martin, author of historical fiction and historical romance, says, "Reading is going somewhere without ever taking a train or ship, an unveiling of new, incredible worlds. It's living a life you weren't born into, and a chance to see everything colored by someone else's perspective. It's learning without having to face consequences of failures and how to best succeed." Lastly, Thomas C. Foster, professor of English, writes, "Reading is an activity of the imagination, and the imagination in question is not the writer's alone."
Look at all these people. There must be some book readers out here today. It's so good to see so many of you. If you're a young person or can still get on the ground and get back up, come on forward. We're gonna have a little time for all ages, a little Wonderbox time today. Oh my gosh. Okay. So today so do you know what we're talking about today? Anyone? Books. Oh, I thought it was Sunday. Got to study, got to read books. Perhaps we'll have some fun. I wonder what's in the Wonderbox today. Anyone would like to open it? Oh my gosh, watch your hands. Thank you. You can go sit back down. Go sit back down. Oh my gosh, this is a book that I have on my bookshelf. And I bet, how many of you have a bookshelf at home? It can be, sit down. How many of you have a bookshelf at home? Yes? Okay. It has at least one book on it, maybe, or it could be a cookbook. It could be lots of different kinds of books. Well, this one's called Octavia's Brood: Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements. And it's a great book that focuses, inspired by the work of Octavia Butler, who we'll talk a little bit about later today. And it's written by social justice activists, and it's science fiction from that in that genre. So I'm wondering, is anyone currently reading a book? Like, not, I hope not right now, but any at home, anyone reading a book right now? Yes? Oh, okay. Yes, what are you reading right now? Warrior Cats. Any Warrior Cats out there? Yeah, you brought a book. Yeah. Any other readers right now? Yeah, what are you reading? An LGBTQIA book. How great is that? Yeah. She's reading 10 different books at once. That's impressive. How about you, Luca? Heroes in Training. That's great. Aren't we all? Any adults reading anything really great right now? Yeah. Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. Excellent. What else are people reading? Yeah. Oh. Wow. Excellent. Yep. Oh, is that good? Wings of Fire? Okay, I'm gonna check it out. Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's a good series. We had a confirmation back there. Any other books that people are reading? Yeah. How to Really Know a Person by David Brooks. Interesting. Others? What when you go to a store, or do you get your books at stores anymore? Go to Viewpoint downtown. That's a great one. Yeah. That's right. And if you can wait another couple days more than Amazon, you can have it delivered there, and then you can pay the Viewpoint books. And you can, oh my gosh, so you don't actually have to own them. You can just borrow them and then let other people borrow them. Oh my God, that's so great. When you go to a store, is it hard for you to pick out books, anyone? Or do you know exactly what you're getting when you go there? Anyone? Yeah. Well, I think books are so interesting because a lot of books that were spoken about this morning were fiction books, although some were nonfiction or written in some type of social commentary or things like that. But all of the books that we read, I think, shape our imaginations. Does that make sense? Do books shape your imagination? Do books shape your imagination? Oh, okay. No. Okay. So sometimes, is there a book anyone has read that has just blown your imagination out of the water? It was just so unbelievable and it really changed you. Yeah, Luca? Which one? The Spiderwick Chronicles, great. Yeah. Phantom Tollbooth. Oh, I love that one growing up. Any adults who read a book that was like just changed your whole worldview, changed by building a new world? Oh yeah, yeah. Excellent. So sometimes books get kind of a bad rap. And I'm glad to see so many book people here today because last week we had a lot of movie people, a lot of crossover. But both books and movies can be really great for telling us stories that are not ours alone, but are still perhaps fiction or perhaps not so fiction that people might be experiencing from different cultures and backgrounds. So today we're going to have you all go out to your classes, the children and youth. And actually, little plug, March 3rd, the youth right now are working on their own service that they're going to lead on March 3rd. So it's like, watch out, the youth are coming. So they're going to go plan their skit that they're working on. So we're going to sing our children and youth out to their classes. Will you join me?
Before I start my written script, I have to express my joy, gladness, giddiness, hysteria, being offered this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. And I'm sure all of you feel the same and would be loved to have the same opportunity. Marty. I made this a bigger production by adding some visuals. Right now. Other way. We just did. Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. Okay, technical. Like many in our congregation, my life has been enriched and shaped by literature. Much of what I share here will match what you have experienced. There are two kinds of literature in my mind. One, literature with a capital L, and two, books from the popular press, which I call literature with a small L. I have never been a literature snob. I like some of everything, from both the academic large L world and the small L commercial publishers. This morning, I will share a very small sampling of books I have read and describe the benefits they have brought to my life. I think children in today's privileged homes learn to read sooner than I did, and I know they are exposed to a wider range of modern books. In the 1950s, the Dick and Jane readers were popular for younger children, but the books I remember and still have from when I was 6 or 7 years old were the same ones my mother and her sisters read in the 1920s. That one on the left had me wanting to wear overalls, even into my teen years. From 3rd grade through 5th grade, I borrowed my limit, 6 books every week from the bookmobile that parked right in front of our house. I also read all the magazines that came in the mail, including my brother's Boy's Life, my dad's Saturday Evening Post. While in middle school and high school, I haunted the library, still averaging 6 books a week. Those were supplemented by my grandmother's magazines. She had subscriptions to the Reader's Digest, Better Homes and Gardens, Red Book, and National Geographic. What did I get from all that early reading? It exposed me to dialogue beyond what I heard in my home. I learned how people asked questions, how they could lure one another into a situation, how words could lift a person's spirit or dash them downward. Reading enhanced my future ability to communicate by helping me, 1, improve and expand my vocabulary, 2, absorb grammar unconsciously and automatically, and 3, understand nuances between similar but different words. In academic tests of reading comprehension, I was rated 3 grades higher than my classmates. Reading was my Head Start program long before that concept came into vogue. Childhood reading took me to imagined places. Books were far superior to early TV for helping me imagine places beyond middle-class suburbia. More books than I show here made lasting impressions and memories, both by their unique settings and the values the children in the story demonstrated. Imagining places can be about perspective and scale. Through these other children's books, I was taken up close, underground, or to lands of giants and tiny people. I began to understand and empathize with creatures and people different from myself. Later, as an adult, I learned that Jonathan Swift's satiric works protested the prejudices and British Empire expansion of his time. Deeper meanings have also been attributed to the works of Lewis Carroll. So you can see where if you read a book over again, it'll give you extra bonus. Through adult level reading, I explore real places through authors who helped me imagine what they are like through the lens of archaeology, anthropology, and evolution. I was reading adult level historical novels in the 10th grade. I still enjoy exploring world locations, history, and science through well-researched fiction and nonfiction. And when it comes to imagining places, don't forget travelogues. Scientific explorations, social and cultural encounters, methods of transportation, they all come alive when a good author describes them. You can see here that I have 2 favorites for this genre. Place and time are intertwined, but some books make me imagine primarily the time, especially when the time in question is in the long ago past or far into the future. Historical novels and biographies by authors who know how to fill in the unknowable gaps can take you there and make you hear, see, and smell what characters must have felt before the invention of modern plumbing. You can experience the time of John of Gaunt. He was a contemporary of King Richard. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, the perils of exploration during American Western expansion, and the suffering of Native Americans trying to escape the forces of manifest destiny. Historical time exploration is wonderful, but there's more to time than history. What about parallel universes? ghostly emanations, and time travel to the future. Now, those are the literature genres that really stir the imagination. Authors deserve admiration for their bravery in writing about something that defies the laws of physics, biology, or other scientific knowledge available at the time. I'd be glad to talk about any of these you don't recognize. One other benefit comes with reading literature across time and place with emphasis on communication. It is human relations. Literature is about the human experience. Authors are usually good observers of human psychology. Whether in a classic romance or in the most trivial and shallow novel, there are things a reader can absorb about human behavior. I have learned at least 3 things from romance novel themes. 1, people are often driven by past emotional trauma. 2, bad things happen when we make faulty assumptions. And 3, seeking revenge is a wasteful and futile endeavor. Another part of human relations concerns culture and ethnicity. Communication, time, and place in books have been a significant part of imagining the lives of people that don't look like me or who practice a different faith or cultural tradition. I explored some of the Hebrew culture decades ago through novels by Chaim Potok, Leon Uris. I learned a little about ancient Japanese history thanks to James Clavell. My introduction to Black Americans in literature is very recent, mostly through university courses with anthologies featuring Black writers. I'm glad they are finally getting the recognition they deserve. So in summary, how did literature affect my life? I vicariously experienced things outside of my environment. I learned what humans can do by reading their biographies. I grasped a broad range of human behavior, sometimes even in the same character. I witnessed characters using good critical thinking to solve problems. I was exposed to cultures of other parts of the United States and other countries. I gained empathy and understanding of the wider human experience. I hope you too can allow yourselves to be taken lands away by literature.
We have one reading this morning to guide. It's sort of a reading, sort of a set of statistics, which we all love. So this is from an excerpt from an online source that I found. It was published in January of 2023. So you can expand forward if you wish, project forward. And so these are excerpts from Diversity in Book Publishing by Dean Talbot. Diversity in U.S. book publishing has generally been, between 1950 and 2018, about 95% of those American fiction books were published by white authors. Despite the increasing author diversity, white writers are still deeply overrepresented. Here we have, as of 2019, white and Caucasian industry respondents represented about 76%. This is a drop of 3% in 4 years, but still staggeringly white compared to the rest of these populations. 7% made up of Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, South Asian, Southeast Indian. 6% made up of Latinx, Latino, Mexican authors. 5% from Black, Afro-African, Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean, which is an increase, and 3% made up of biracial, multicultural respondents. Gender, as of 2019, 74% of respondents in the industry were cis women, and cis is opposite of trans, and so your your gender is performing, or your gender is as you were assigned at birth. 74% of respondents were cis women, 23% cis men, and those who are gender fluid, non-binary, gender queer, non-conforming represented 1%. Regarding orientation, as of 2019, 81% of industry respondents were straight or heterosexual, which has dropped 7% since 2015. 10% of respondents were bisexual or pansexual. 6% of respondents were gay or lesbian, which has dropped actually since 2015. And 1% of respondents were asexual. The last slide, the last statistic I don't have a slide for, and it's around disability. As of 2019, 89% of industry respondents reported that they did not have a disability. So that means 11% of respondents did report having a disability. The number of respondents with a disability has increased about 3% since 2015. This increase in the number of respondents, though, with a disability during the period could be attributed to an increased recognition of disabilities caused by mental health issues. Thus ends our reading. I believe I have mentioned this in the past, but I am a part of a minister's study group, which gathers each year in November on the confluence of the Mississippi, Illinois, and Missouri rivers. Since 1951, the Prairie Group, as it is called, has gathered, quote, to preserve the heritage of the scholarly ministry and nurture the life of the mind among Unitarian clergy serving on the sometimes isolating stretches of the Midwest prairie. Every year we have a program committee which assigns 5 papers, like 5,500 word papers, and 1 response for each, about 1,500 word response. A long reading list is assembled and the collective group decides the topic at the end of the gathering for the following year. So for example, for this past November, the topic was trauma, a pretty big topic. And thus the papers and responses broke the topic down into important and compelling issues relevant to Unitarian Universalist ministers and our context for ministry in the current and emerging day. I have been going to Prairie Group since November of 2016, when my mentors brought me as an intern. But it was in November of 2018 that I was assigned my first response paper. Are any of you familiar with Octavia Butler? I mentioned it earlier. Octavia Butler was the topic. She was the topic, and her writings were the topic for that year. Butler is without question the mother of Black science fiction and has inspired innumerable writers and readers through her novels and liberating imagination. Now, it is quite evident that choosing the life and works of Octavia Butler as a theme for Prairie Group indicates the increased diversity of women and queer ministers in this collective. I doubt, I perhaps guarantee, University of Chicago professor James Luther Adams or All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma minister John Wolfe could have never imagined such a topic being chosen. Why? Well, because our topics of yesteryear have often centered the writings and scholarship of those who share the dominant cultural characteristics of our membership, often white, heterosexual males with great privilege who have likely been dead for some time. But I digress. The point is that Octavia Butler and several topics since and a few prior show that we as a study group were entering less charted waters for the better. Octavia Butler was the author of essential works, including The Parable of the Sower and its sequel, The Parable of the Talents. She died before completing the trilogy. Her writings include Kindred, which I read back in high school and is, I hope, something that more young people read in their teenage years. Her writings opened new frontiers for Black science fiction and a related genre called Afrofuturism. And now, nearly 20 years after her death, her visions of liberation and forewarnings of what might come if we continue down our paths of domination are more prescient than ever. All of this brings us to the questions of how books and literature shape our lives. Last week, I said that our character is developed by the characters we encounter in film, among other mediums. The more narrow the characters with which we surround ourselves, the more narrow our understanding of this beautifully complex and diverse universe in which we live. The more we watch movies that provide alternative centers of lived experience and culture, the more our multicultural character, values, and ethics will be shaped by those principles of inclusion, humility, and love. Now, whereas we talked about character last week, today is all about imagination. One of my favorite themes of the human experience. How does literature shape our imaginations of what is possible now or in some future time to come? Just a quick poll. We heard some books earlier, but a quick poll out of curiosity. If you would classify your reading preferences personally, regardless of frequency, so no opting out, would you personally gravitate more toward fiction or nonfiction? So we can do fiction, raise your hand, and nonfiction. Okay, for those who gravitate more towards fiction, which of these following genres would you most prefer? How about romance? Okay. Mystery? What about historical fiction? Okay. What else do I have? What about thrillers or true crime? Oh, wow, true crime folks. Okay, there are countless others, but to just come full circle, how many enjoy science fiction? Or fantasy, or great, there's a lot of overlapping fields there. Now, I don't mean to leave out our nonfiction readers here. So there are some other genres that are in nonfiction, like history. Any people like reading history? Self-help or memoir, kind of social commentary or political ideas, yeah. Spiritual or religious texts, ancient or modern. Okay, hear me clearly. All of these genres have importance and space within our continuously expanding library of knowledge of the world and of our cultural imaginations for the future. What I am curious about is, though, the proliferation of Black science fiction, fantasy, Afrofuturism, and more broadly, what is called speculative fiction in the 21st century. As I was preparing for this service and reflecting how literature shapes or unlocks our imagination, I came across a quote from Walida Imarisha. Briefly, Walida Imarisha is a phenomenal human being. She is an educator, writer, public scholar, and spoken word artist. And you can find many of her lectures on YouTube. Anyway, this quote I stumbled upon stopped me in my tracks. And it is about the tension and the sometimes hardline camps divided between those who gravitate towards fiction and those to nonfiction. She writes, quote, "I've met many people who are very proud that they only read nonfiction, and I feel sad for them because we have to be able to imagine something else. In science fiction, we don't have to stay contained within what is possible. We can start with the question, what do we want? Rather than the question, what is realistic?" Let me repeat this. She writes, "I've met many people who are very proud that they only read nonfiction, and I feel sad for them because we have to be able to imagine something else. In science fiction, we don't have to stay contained within what is possible. We can start with the question, what do we want, rather than the question, what is realistic? I just find this whole dynamic fascinating, and taken together with our reading, so to speak, this morning, which outlined some of the publishing inequities and trends in the United States, we might go a step further to ask this question. How transformative and liberating can our visions for the future be if our imaginations in the dominant culture are shaped by what is possible now, by what is realistic now? Or we could ask the question, what would happen if we began to imagine a world shaped by what we want for a pluralistic society grounded in justice, equity, peace, and love? I believe our futures can and will be as awesome as our imagination. So if we are to shape such a just future, to whom will we turn for guidance? Well, we have tended to look for justice builders and peacemakers of the past and present. Sometimes we may resonate more with one social justice movement or time over another. Perhaps it is generational or cultural. Perhaps it is about where we fall in the matrix of political views. Regardless, we tend to see wisdom from those who are doing the work already and seek to support, emulate, and build upon efforts to nurture a world where all can thrive. But we might ask, where do the activists turn for inspiration? Merely toward one another? Well, I'm confident there are networks of mutual support, sharing the best practices and finding intersections in the movements for justice. Yes, and I can imagine throughout the ages, social justice advocates have looked to the written word, to the arts for guidance and imagination of where to go from here. And the text, the books, literature, big, small, letter L, writings, I'm sure span the spectrum of genre and era. But what is likely a thread that weaves through all of the social justice inspired text is that these works embody some type of radical imagination. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom we celebrate earlier this year around the country, was deeply inspired by both the writings and stories found within the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, as well as the philosophy and work of Gandhi in India, among others. Whether interpreting ancient texts or considering new revelation in the day, he was cultivating what Walter Brueggemann would call the prophetic imagination. Now, I know I've used elements of this quote in the past, perhaps earlier this month or last month, on several occasions, but it has great shelf life and import for today, this morning. Brueggemann said of prophetic imagination, quote, "The prophet engages in futuring fantasy. The prophet does not ask if the vision can be implemented, for questions of implementation are of no consequence until the vision can be imagined. The imagination must come before the implementation. Our culture is competent to implement almost anything and to imagine almost nothing. The same royal consciousness that makes it possible to implement anything and everything is the one that shrinks imagination, because imagination is a danger. Thus, every totalitarian regime is frightened of the artist. It is the vocation of the prophet to keep alive the ministry of imagination, to keep on conjuring and proposing futures alternative to the single one the king wants to urge as the only thinkable one. My friends, imagination and thus fiction are dangerous things. They are threats to the status quo, to those in power. And yet we read on and we dream on. And outside of a biblical prophetic imagination, there are those who turn to speculative fiction among other places, for discerning alternative futures and paths forward. Back to Walida Imarisha, who reflects on this intersection. She writes, quote, "Many folks have asked us what science fiction could possibly have to do with social justice organizing. And every time we've responded, everything, everything. We want organizers and movement builders to be able to claim the vast space of possibility, to be birthing visionary stories, using their everyday realities and experiences of changing the world. They can form the foundation for the fantastic. And we hope build a future where the fantastic liberates the mundane." Another powerful and, in my view, very accurate take on the liberating power of imagination and literature, past and present. You could switch out organizers and movement builders for writers and authors, especially in light of the publishing statistics earlier, and we could see another profound meaning. Quote, "We want writers and authors to be able to claim the vast space of possibility, to be birthing visionary stories, using their everyday realities and experiences of changing the world. They can form the foundation for the fantastic, and we hope build a future where the fantastic liberates the mundane." I want to be a part of a future where the fantastic liberates the mundane. This is what I believe we strive to do here imperfectly at UUCCI and in our lives out in the world. We seek the fantastic, the unimaginable. We seek the sacred. And despite a world that would have us believe that this is all that is possible, we choose to say no. We choose instead to dream impossible dreams and cast impractical visions. We cultivate here a ministry of imagination and keep it alive. And each one of us is by our existence an artist, a creator, and hopefully one who will bring comfort and liberation to the hopeless and mundane. May ours be a canon, a bookshelf, a Kindle, where we find the fullness of human imagination of what is possible, of what we want to make real, make manifest in this lifetime and over lifetimes to come. May we read with one another, read to one another, and live lives that one day builds a bridge that connects and transforms fiction into nonfiction, from what is to what will be. May it be so. And amen.